Well, my dear friends, it's that time of the week again. It's Saturday night. It's 6 p.m. GMT.
I pay for my.
If you're out in the United States of America, depending on what part of the world you are,
You get my time.
it's 1 p.m. EST. I believe it's somewhere around 10 a.m. Pacific.
I already did my time. I pay for my crime. I already did my time. I pay for my crime. I already did my time.
Right on the back of 2 weeks of deadly encounters, where we looked at the issues surrounding the unlawful killing of innocent young men on the streets of the United States of America.
Do or die.
We followed that quite quickly tonight
I was too young and foolish to stay in school.
with the death penalty issue. It's one that's very close to my heart, and it's a show that's well overdue.
Very quick on my
And I have alongside with me my normal guest, my co-host, Dr. David Remay. I do have with us
sweet
an advocate for the abolish the death penalty,
range.
Annette Blankenship.
Don't need no gun in my hand. It
And
ain't
we're going to be looking at some particular cases
short to spin it all.
and the whole death penalty issue as a whole.
Trying to cope with this living hell. Already did my time. I pay for my crime.
Miscarriages of justice and wrongful convictions
Get my time. I pay for my
was my first call many years ago. And those of you who know me will remember that I was the chairman of the campaign for the Cardiff 3,
already did my time.
formerly known as the Cardiff 5, where 5 young men were convicted and sentenced to life for a murder we all know that they didn't commit. After 4 years of campaigning, the 3 that were eventually convicted were eventually set free.
I never got home my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do.
It doesn't always end that way for everybody that's innocently convicted.
Admit.
There's not always a silver lining at the end,
Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live.
and it doesn't always end in a fairy tale ending.
I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump.
For some,
The kid had a lot in
they end up on death row,
Terminator, much meaner than
and for others,
Schwarzenegger. I'd shoot you up
they end up dead.
like a real alligator.
There's no way of painting pretty colors around this particular issue.
The opening statements are going on right
It's as serious as it gets. Life or death.
prison.
If you are sentenced to death, the probability, the possibility
Already did.
of trying to prove yourself innocent becomes nigh on impossible.
Already did my time.
Today I'd really want to take a look at how that comes to be and what we as a people could do,
Did my time.
raising our voice,
Already
bringing an awareness to an issue
Baby, my crime.
that seems to be a closed book as far as
Baby, my crime. Did my time. I paid for my crime.
prosecutorial system is concerned.
I paid for my crime. I'm trying to get this felony up.
Now you may know someone who has been convicted, sentenced to death,
Live like an ordinary.
or who has been spending their life on death row.
To all of my friends in the
This is the show that you want to be listening to.
worldwide. There was not a man I couldn't beat. I was good with my hands and very quick on my feet. I was swimming in women
Annette Blankenship
all over the street. I was
is
getting
a lifelong
sweet.
activist
Change.
and supporter of the abolish the death penalty,
I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand.
campaigning for the release of innocent convicted men
Spend it all.
and women
Trying to cope with this
across the globe.
already did my
Dr. David Remay needs no introduction, my co-host and sidekick,
did my time. I paid for my crime.
whose expertise is in prosecutorial misconduct
Did my time. I paid for my crime.
and Black American history.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime.
So it's time to gather yourselves around your radios and the internet.
I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than super.
Make sure that you get your coffee ready,
I'm not
on tap,
to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you.
as we go into 2 hours
I must admit, I
of
was
sincere, genuine discussion
now
on the issues relating to and pertaining to
life I used to live. I
the death penalty.
was young and dumb. My brain was so numb. I was a real Forrest Gump, but I was nobody's chump.
Death at the hands of another.
I've been coming. I was the real Terminator, much meaner than Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Trying to offer hope to the many that are sitting down in death row as we speak.
Especially all you haters.
That there might be light at the end of the tunnel.
My time.
That there is hope.
My crime. Already did my time. Already
That their situation,
I paid for my crime.
their circumstance
My time.
The opening
be understood.
statements are going on right now. He could be facing life in prison. Prison.
well, well, trying to cope with this living hell. Trying to cope with this living hell. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
Well, without no further ado, let me just introduce my guest. And we'll just get Dr. David Rumey right in there. Good evening, Dr. David Rumey.
Hello, Kervin, from the Atlantic Ocean on the seaside of Connecticut, where it's 95 degrees Fahrenheit and hot as the dickens. But we have a lot to entertain us in America. You can take, for example, Melania Trump. Why does Melania Trump hang out with Donald Trump? Obvious. He has $10 billion and high cholesterol. Who wouldn't? Now, why is it that Donald Trump is always seen with her? Because all of his other wives are for Hillary. I'll tell you something about Donald Trump. He is a schmuck of the schmucks. And he set out to prove that President Obama was not born in the United States. And what he proved is that President Obama is born in the United States. And the bad news is so is Donald Trump. So we've got to live with him one way or another. This week we've had the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. Believe me, it was nothing but an orgy of hate. You had people screaming at the top of their lungs, lock her up, as if they were George Orwell's cockroaches set loose upon the American people and the world. Never have I been so ashamed to be an American. And they were all shouting, all lives matter, all lives matter, all lives matter. Except, of course, what they really mean is only one big orange life matters, and that's Donald Trump. Because when it comes to all lives matter, and for your guest listening in Great Britain and other parts of the world, our friends in Africa and the Middle East, let me tell you, there's something in America we call a dog whistle. A dog whistle is a high-pitched whistle, and only a dog can hear it. But when the dog hears it, he comes running out of nowhere to bark and cuddle up to you and pretend to love you. Well, the white American haters now have a dog whistle. And that dog whistle is all lives matter. And what all lives matter is, meaning, is that black lives don't matter. And if you don't believe that for 1 second, take Miami this week. A man with autism escaped an institution. A black helper ran out in the middle of a highway to save the man's life, who happened to be white. And the black man was shot. Now, why was he shot? Because a policeman told the man on site, who had a long rifle, that the black man was probably a terrorist and was carrying a gun. And so they shot him in the leg. They didn't kill him, but they shot him in the leg. Now, the policeman, instead of being locked up as an attempted murderer, is now on administrative leave, and the greatest punishment of all is without pay. Now, when a policeman is put on administrative leave without pay, that doesn't really mean he's without pay. It just means he's not getting paid by the government, because the police union takes care of him, and they take care of his family. And instead of being locked up in jail like the black man would have been, he is let loose upon the society with his mental condition and his hatred for people of color. And don't ever doubt it. And when people say all lives matter, that is a dog whistle. And the minute somebody says that to me, I'll say the black people, Black Lives Matter. Why do you have to change it? When you go to a Jewish Holocaust museum, you don't go in and talk about Armenians. You don't go in and talk about Native Americans. You don't go in and talk about Aztecs. You don't go and talk about Indians in Peru who are called Incas. You don't talk about the massive genocide that took place against those people, do you? Of course not. Do you talk about the 20% of Poland that died in World War II? 6 million of 30 million people. I didn't take genocide. Or what about Rwanda, or Ghana, or the Zulu, or the Ashanti, or any of the other regions that Mussolini wanted to wipe out? Why don't you mention those people when you go into a Jewish Holocaust museum? You know why? Because we're talking about Jews. And when I say Black Lives Matter, I'm talking about blacks. So don't tell me about your aliens on Mars. I've got better things to do. Now, I feel very sorry for the people of Munich, where a crazy nut went in and killed 7 teenagers and 2 adults last night in Munich, a city I love. Of course, Donald Trump is now CIA briefings and national intelligence briefings. So they probably told him, keep your big trap shut or you're going to look like an idiot, because our information says he's not an Arab, he's not a Muslim, he's not ISIS. So if you come out like you did yesterday and start blaming people, you're going to look like a schmuck. So he kept his mouth shut, and it protected him, and I'm sorry it did, because anything can expose that cockroach as not wearing a dress. I would like it. Now, let me tell you how badly it is in America. The Washington Post is our second newspaper of record, the first being the New York Times. And racists call it the Jew York Times, which is disgusting. But anyway, that's America. Welcome to the land of hate. Donald Trump has 6 headlines in the capital of America's newspaper today, the Washington Post. Here they are. Donald Trump is a unique threat to American democracy, the editorial board. Jennifer Rubin, final grade for the Republican National Convention, D. In America, grades are A, B, C, D, F. D. Donald Trump's creepy fascist infomercial by Alexandra Petri. Trump is cultivating a state of panic. Michael Gerson. Trump's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad, long speech. Daniel Dresner. Trump's America is a dark and desperate place. Dana Milbank. Now, we have D&G in America. When I grew up, D&G meant Dolce & Gabbana, which means a very big credit card bill if you go there and buy clothes. Now D&G means dark and gloomy. That is the America Donald Trump is painting. And let me say this. In 1927, Benito Mussolini, a fascist swine from Italy, una porco grande dall'Italia, uno Romo molto matto, he said this. He said, to all immigrants who left Italy for America, work hard and make America great. Hello. Make America great. And newspaper and reading books that this Donald Trump does. He's a schmuck. Now, WikiLeaks came out today on the moment that Mrs. Clinton is going to appoint her vice president nominee, and they came out and said that the Jewish leader of the Democratic National Committee, Deborah Wasserman Schultz, who the Bernie people hate with a passion, and Bernie is Jewish, tried to spread the word that Bernie doesn't believe in God and he's a bad Jew. One Jew telling another Jew he's a rotten Jew. It sounds like Israel and America. And who's getting blamed? Hillary. Who's getting blamed? Democrats. And who's blowing it up all out of proportion? Donald, the duck-endorsed freak Trump. Who did he have at his convention? Second-rate soap opera actor Antonio Sabato, who can be seen naked on the internet. His wife Melania, who can be seen naked on the internet. The duck people who can be seen ignorant on television. These are the dregs of Louisiana's deepest swamps of racism and bigotry. The home of David Duke, the KKK Meister, who came out and on TV. He has religious fanatics. He paid a black preacher to stand up there and preach like he had just fallen out of the devil's anus after he had the worst imaginable on earth, including rotten possum and rotten squirrel meat. It is the most disgusting, embarrassing, shameful thing I have ever seen in my life. And one final note before I end this wonderfully to America that was. Donald Trump came out and said and treated our great allies in Europe, in NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as if they were some kind of a credit card holder who didn't pay their debts. And he said, if they don't pay their debts to NATO, we won't defend them. That is the most asinine, ignorant, incomprehensible malarkey ever heard from any place other than upside down kissing the Blarney Stone in Ireland itself. In fact, I have never been so embarrassed. America is behind the nations and has been behind on its dues in the UN. And based on that, the government just gave him hundreds of millions of dollars of in-kind wealth. And so let me say this. We are at a point in America, I, as a veteran of the United States Army, as a person who has taken pride in the great foundations that form the values of this wonderful land, that has a lot more to do to advance. We're on the dawn and on the precipice of an edge that is going to lead us into a disaster never imagined by our founding fathers, by Abraham Lincoln, by Franklin Roosevelt, or by Barack Obama. And I'm sorry for it, and we have to do all we can. And those people who say they're not voting, or they're mad because Bernie didn't win, or they're mad because of this or that, those people who don't vote, if we elect Donald the fascist, African-American hating bigot, it will be your fault. It will be your fault. And I blame you 1,000 million %. You are a detriment to freedom itself if you do not do the responsible thing and vote what in your mind may be the lesser of two evils, but to vote for the great traditions that are and is and will always be, if we don't get Donald Trump and his white, heated, racist bigots who were shouting, lock her up, as though they had just been entered into a concentration camp lottery and won it. And that's the way it is in America today.
Wow. And believe you me, that is a very angry Dr. David Rubey. Thank you, David, for that update on what's going on in America today. And we're going to be hearing a lot more from Dr. David as we go through this show and as we deal with this particular challenging issue, which is a very passionate and sensitive one indeed. So without further ado, let us introduce our guest speaker tonight, leading activist, Annette Blankenship. Introduce yourself, Annette. First of all, good evening, and how are you?
Good evening. My name's Annette Blankenship, and I'm a criminal justice reform advocate, and I've lobbied for the death penalty. I've lobbied for a lot to do with prison issues, and I'm from America. I'm from Virginia, and we need fixed here in America, but we need to be fixed in Virginia, because I have done witness too much, and I just think it's really important that we start addressing criminal justice reform coming from all angles.
One of the biggest conversations we've had on this show, especially with Dr. David Rubey, is the need for reform, prosecutorial reform, and prison reform. So, Dr. David, let me hand over to you in response to Annette's opening.
Annette, I'm so happy you are working on this very important issue. Two big events are from Virginia today, which is the mother of all our states and was once considered the most important colony in America with Massachusetts. The first is that a court overturned the governor, who's a wonderful governor, who's trying to do the best he can, overturned your governor's executive order saying that if you are a convicted felon, you will be able to vote once you have done your time, paid your restitution, and you're off probation. Now, the federal court, which is a Republican court there, ruled that that was illegal for him to do. So he's going to have to get the legislature to pass a law, and in Virginia, that's going to be very hard. But 35 states do not require a prohibition against people who have been convicted of a crime from voting once they've been made right again. But sadly, Virginia is going to be one of those states, mainly in the South, like Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, is going to require that scarlet letter. The modern scarlet letter in America is the F, not the A for adultery. That's quite all right. You can commit adultery. It's the F. If you're a felon, you are branded for life. You're no longer a human being. You're allowed to be treated like the worst dregs of society, and that's a sad thing. Now, the other thing is, this is a little positive, is the United States Senator Tim Kaine, I'm looking at it on television right now, has just been announced to be the vice presidential candidate to run with Mrs. Clinton. So Virginia is in the news today. Now, I want to ask you, how many people has Virginia executed in the last 20 years? And is there any movement there to do away with the death penalty?
I cannot answer you on how many people's been executed. I know it's been over 100. And I haven't been in contact with people to know exactly where everything stands with the death penalty. I know in the last decade, since I've been advocating, that we got the age raised in Virginia. It used to be 16 for the death penalty, and we raised it to 18. And I know a lot of work needs to be done. I've volunteered on a few death penalty cases, and it's just work that needs to be done. And with Senator Kaine, it's funny how he got voted in last night. I mean, not funny, I respect him. When I started lobbying against the death penalty and for criminal justice reform, I lobbied by myself in front of the governor's mansion in 2005 when Tim Kaine was our governor to stop Teresa Lewis's execution, and it was somebody else's execution. Now, I was by myself one time, and Virginia just stays so, we are such an military state. I mean, this state, and it's across the country. Our state just penalizes and penalizes and penalizes and disenfranchises people to the point that we are not helping each other no more. We are not, by law, helping no one. It is so many laws wrote into state and federal law now that I don't even really think our leaders, our legislators, or our state representatives, I really don't think they know what to do because it's contradicting. And I'll speak of Teresa Lewis that got executed by the Commonwealth of Virginia. She wasn't the actual trigger person. She got executed in the Commonwealth of Virginia when she wasn't the actual trigger person. Now
that was in 2010, but let me say the last person you killed in Virginia, not you, but the state, was a Spanish man in 2015, and you've had 111 people executed, 111 humans executed since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976. What truly amazes me is the audacity of your state to kill foreigners as well. You've killed people from Morocco, Pakistan, Vietnam, Paraguay, Mexico. It seems like no one is ineligible from being killed in your state. Now, about 155 Americans who have been on death row have later been found to have been innocent. How can you be sure in Virginia that those 111 that were executed were all guilty as charged, considering the mistake rate in this country?
You cannot be sure. And I will
So how does your legislature justify knowing that they could take the life of a human being when that person was not guilty? How do they justify that in Virginia?
They just put it to the side and hope it disappears. And I've witnessed that again and again and again and again, because people like me speak up every day for decades. And I'll go to the General Assembly and I'll lobby legislation. I haven't done it in a while, but I've done it. And it's just like they don't have to answer to nobody. And I personally, along with many other people that's scared to speak up here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we are tired of not being heard by our leaders. In Virginia, it's called the Good Old Boys Network. We're tired of not being heard. I have went to my leaders. I have wrote my governor. I have wrote the Attorney General. I have went to the Department of Corrections. I have went to the Parole Board. I went all the way to the Supreme Court watching one case where the circuit court that person wasn't guilty. Yes.
Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Continue.
Yeah, David, you're coming through live over the air. You're going to need to mute your mic if you're on your phone. Carry on, Annette.
No. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear. Annette went out.
Okay, no, I can hear her clearly. It's you that's losing the signal.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was losing the signal. Oh, I'm not on the phone. This is far more interesting than my mother. My mother calls me with recipes all the time. But believe me, this is far more interesting.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, we're not losing Annette's online here. She's absolutely clear.
Hear you.
That's fine. That's fine. Carry on, Annette.
Okay. Well, I speak of one inmate. I forgot where I was at, but I speak of another case that I've watched from circuit court being overturned from a guilty to innocent, and then it went through the Court of Appeals all the way to the Supreme Court here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And do you know, after the original court that sentenced this man overturned it to not guilty, the Supreme Court shot it down, and that man's still sitting in prison. Now, I've been volunteering on that case for over a decade, and that's where who is anybody? And I'm not trying to disrespect judges. I'm not trying to disrespect legislation. I'm not trying to disrespect my governor, because I have volunteered on just about every one of their campaigns. What I'm saying is, how is any of this making any sense anymore? We put into place innocent commissions back in the early 2000s. Now, Tim Kaine signed off on some legislation along with Mark Warner on non-biological evidence. Okay, we got biological evidence. We got it backed up in labs because nobody wants to check it, because nobody wants to say they're wrong. Okay, but we're all only human and we make mistakes. But when the Innocence Commission, Virginia put together a board, they come out with a book called The Innocence Commission by John B. Gold, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. It come out in 2004, and it's based right out the root of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I suggest for anyone that thinks the death penalty is the only answer to please read that book. And then in 2000, Actual Innocence come out by Barry Scheck and Peter Newfield. And then it's another book, The Death Penalty on Trial, Crisis in American Justice by Bill Curtis. And I don't know what year that come out. But I am saying we need to halt every execution in America. Virginia needs to start being smart on crime like it was started getting tough on crime, because we started getting tough on crime. We've done got too tough on crime. And with the trigger man rule here in Virginia, we're executing people that didn't even kill somebody. They were part of it, but they didn't kill nobody. We sentence people that end up finding out they're innocent. We sentence them to even more time than the guilty party. What is up with this court system? How can anybody say that this court system is not broken and torn to shreds?
Absolutely. Now, here's the thing. David is coming with directly as far as the issue in Virginia is concerned, but I actually want to open this up a bit wider. So humor me if you guys can for just a couple of minutes as I lay down what I want to bring to the table. Currently, as of, and this is the latest figures that I have, which is dated back to January, at the beginning of January 2016, where you currently at that time had 2,943 inmates on death row across the United States of America. Now, once you're on death row, that means that you can subsequently be executed at any time whatsoever, right? Now, in the UK, we are absolutely dead against the death penalty, and rightly so. And for me, I want to get back to one or two particular issues, and I would like you, Annette, if you get an opportunity to raise a couple of cases that I'm going to try and give a scenario to, because the case that I got involved with, which was the Cardiff 3, or worldwide known as the Cardiff 5, whichever way you prefer to call it. Satish prefers it as the Cardiff 5. When I was campaigning, it was the Cardiff 3 because only 3 got convicted, even though 5 were originally arrested and charged. But we were talking about a horrendous murder of a white woman, whom the chief inspector of CID had gone on national TV for 10 months with a photo fit of one white individual that they believed to be the suspect for this murder. He was seen on the steps of this woman's house with blood on his hands on the morning of her death. And they put a photo fit out with an eyewitness who had seen him, and that went out worldwide. That went out all over the country. That was national, international, and the head of the CID went on national TV, Crime Watch, and said that this was the man that they were looking for 10 whole months. And then they couldn't find this man in 10 months. And then shortly after, they went into a local community where this woman was a prostitute and arrested 3,000 young black men, and took them all in one by one, and eventually whittled them down to 5 people who had nothing in common with each other, who were not, only 3 of them were acquainted, and eventually charged all 5 of them with murder. The one who they thought was the biggest culprit, who was the one that they claimed because he was 6'6", bullied the others into murder, was eventually acquitted. But yet the ones that they said he bullied were the ones that were found guilty and sentenced to life. Now, the police had in their possession saliva belonging to the culprit. They had sperm belonging to the culprit. They had a perfect palm print in blood on the wallpaper belonging to the culprit, where he leaned upon the wall as he leaned over the body and stabbed it over 50 times. None of these forensic evidence belonged to any of the 5 that were ever arrested and charged, and everybody knew it. It was conceded during the whole trial that this forensic evidence didn't belong to any single one of them. Yet 3 of the 5 were found guilty and sentenced to life. And yet we spent 4 years campaigning to eventually get them free, and that became a test case in this country, which meant that all sorts of forensic evidence and the way that the police went about their duty and the way that they could prosecute had to be changed in order to accommodate these new findings. Now, what I'm trying to get to, Annette, is that in America you have people sitting on death row with ludicrous charges that neither forensic or eyewitness, right, can place them at the scene of the crime. Why are there not changes being made to the entire judicial system in order to make sure that these ridiculous mistakes that has people's lives on hold until such time as they're executed, why are these changes not being force-fed into the system? That's the question for you, Annette.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would like to answer that question, but I've been asking that question for 27 years myself, because DNA evidence is one of the strongest evidences that can be, in some senses, it can be right, on the money, and in other sentences it can be wrong. But when you got eyewitnesses and you got the DNA, and then you got that other person that committed that crime, why is anyone in America sitting in prison for a crime they did not commit? And I speak with conviction and I speak with passion, because even back in the day, before we started using DNA technology in the court of law in America, or the court of law in the Commonwealth of Virginia, it used to be only sperm as evidence, on, spit, saliva, or blood. Okay, so sometimes crime scenes might have got contaminated. But yet again, we have the science available today. We have technology that can turn over these convictions Monday morning. But see, then that would create somebody having, again, to say they're wrong or they made a mistake. Nobody has to say they're wrong in America, because nobody says they're wrong no more in America. We have learned how to be so cold-hearted that we don't even know the facts when it hits us in the face and we're getting ready to execute someone. That should be question enough for our whole government to sit down and think about it for a minute.
There's even cases in the United States of America where people who have actually been either eyewitnesses or put the complaints forward or have been the chief prosecution witness have rescinded their evidence and have turned around and said they made a mistake, and they still will not overturn the conviction. How can that be possible in a modern world where justice is what needs to be seen to be done? Dr. David.
People are scared.
Let me say that what Annette is saying is largely true, and Virginia is a particularly, they call it the Commonwealth, but it's one of the 50 states, is a particularly difficult Commonwealth. They're very self-righteous. They're the land of Robert E. Lee, the Army of Northern Virginia. They've killed, that state has killed more Americans by execution than any other state in our history. In fact, Virginia was the first state, or colony rather, in 1608 to execute a human being in the New World from Europe. So they have a long history of this. And I think, and Annette, I would like you to address this, I think it's a combination of three things. One, the religion. The religion there justifies a lot of Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, really conservative, fanatical, evangelical, Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr. now, radical pseudo-Christians who believe hate and murder are far superior to love and life. Secondly, I think there's a certain anger at minorities, because those minorities are the cause that the Civil War happened, and they lost the Civil War, and they'll never be done taking revenge. And third is a lack of education and a lack of a sense of justice and humanity and liberal ideas that come with that education. Annette, am I far off base?
You're hitting the money right on the head with what you're saying. Because I am I always have been. And I mean, even with my leaders, I went to the General Assembly again and again and again and again. And it's like, I don't even got to speak to you if they don't want to. I went to the department and met with the Department of Corrections one time, or a few times, but they act like they ain't got to answer to nobody. And it's just sad that for us to be such a godly state, that we're so ungodly, that we're going to look down on the minority, because I've never forgot where I came from, and everything I've learned on my own through helping people represent themselves in the court of law. And I know nobody has answered my questions yet. I was a witness. I was tampered with by prosecution, and I have asked for over a decade, why is it 2 men in prison for a crime that the eyewitness placed only one at the scene. Okay, that should be enough to raise concern. But then I get involved.
Who did you ask that of?
I've went through my legislators all the way to my governor and stuff.
But have you asked the prosecutor who prosecuted the case?
I haven't talked to that prosecutor.
He's the one who asked for the death penalty, right?
Well, he didn't ask for he asked for the death penalty for the one that committed the murder.
Well,
and it got overturned.
I'm sorry, what?
It got overturned. It got overturned.
Oh, yeah, I know. But I'm saying he asked for the death penalty. It got overturned, and then it was reinstated, right?
No. This is.
Oh, so you're talking about a different case. But let me ask you, when you appeal, when you argue on behalf of a person's life, it seems to me the first person you would go to is the prosecutor, because if the prosecutor does not ask for the death penalty, the court will not consider the death penalty. So it seems to me the first person I'd go to is the prosecutor, who is an elected official and who gives the death penalty to please those bloodthirsty people who want it. Why don't you go to the prosecutor?
I have been. I can't answer that. I have no idea. In Commonwealth of Virginia, the things that's done behind closed doors by prosecutors, I wouldn't.
It's not just Virginia, believe me.
Right. So that's the reason I've handled my own. Because after I was tampered with over 20 years ago, I don't trust nobody. And then after what I've seen live and live in color, we need to get our acts together, because killing people who kill people is wrong.
Now, Annette, tell me, do you have other people working with you, or are you kind of a lone ranger out there doing this? Do you have a group?
I've floated around with different groups. I've floated around with the different death penalty organizations, different criminal justice reform education. But I am basically by myself. I'm alone.
Can I just ask you? Can I ask you a quick question? I know it's probably thrown you way off course, but again, what is the relationship in Virginia like between the Virginians and black people in general? What is that relationship like now? Because it's never been the greatest from my recollection. But what is it like now?
Well, I can tell you, white people that I've spoke with since this Black Lives Movement started, they are very prejudiced towards the Black Lives Movement. So the divided state, and it can get very racist. And a lot of us have to face that racism every day, different ones of us. But it's just like back in the old times. It's just like that. It's like slavery never went nowhere.
It doesn't seem to have gone very far indeed. And commentators and spectators from the sidelines in Europe, here in the UK in particular, are watching very closely as the relationships between blacks and Americans just fall apart.
Kervin, let me follow up on your question. You mentioned, Annette, that since Black Lives Matter has come to the forefront, that more people in Virginia are showing examples of racism or prejudice or dislike or dissatisfaction. Could you elaborate on that and give maybe some specific example?
The flag, the Confederate flag, when South Carolina voted for it to be taken down, and the federal government voted for it, I witnessed in my city I live in the anger of nothing but rednecks and trucks with rebel flag for weeks on end. Weeks. And then the interstates, they're giving them leeway on interstates to put up the rebel flags. To me, the rebel flag resembles hate and taking sides with people. Now, I don't know my history like that to be saying something like that, but I'm going to tell you from what I have seen, people was getting ready to hurt each other, and I don't think our leaders could do so much better for us But that rebel flag just gets shoved in people's faces for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Because I do respect my
One
heritage,
second,
but
David. Annette, recently, all over worldwide TV, there has been broadcastings and displays of black men and women being shot, killed, wrongfully or forcefully arrested in a very aggressive and violent manner. There's been outrage, not just in certain parts of America, but right across the world. People have, in fact, the one that David spoke about at the beginning of the show, where you talked about the man who lay down on the ground with his arms up and was shot. That became national news. Although I posted it days ago, it became national news in the UK yesterday. So, how are they responding to the obvious misjustice that's been done out there at the minute and being put on the TV? How are they responding or reacting to that?
being in Virginia, it's like you live in another world. People act like it don't happen, but it's somebody else coming with them deal with. We are in a very cold mentality in Virginia. We are very standoffish in Virginia. We are very ugly to one another in Virginia. We don't listen to each other in Virginia. Communication is a very bad problem in Virginia that needs addressed for criminal justice reform, because that's the only way that it's going to work for everyone. When we got 1 in 3 families affected by the Department of Justice or criminal justice, it is time we change our ways. Virginia got tough on crime and got tough on crime quick back in the early 90s. And it has did nothing but escalate and escalate and escalate to all of us are walking like we are in a single file in a concentration camp. And that's just the way I call it as I see it, because that's how I'm 49 years old, and I have been treated like a plantation slave my own self for 49 years. I have went to my legislators. I have voted for voted, and still went to these people I voted for, and still nobody today can help me with nothing. And it's a struggle. It's a very bad struggle.
Kervin, Annette, thank you for that. Let me explain something that, from a context point of view for our listeners. Virginia is uniquely, as are other states in their own ways, divided. For example, Pennsylvania is a long rectangle of a state, but they call it the T-state, because if you drive from the far west, which is Pittsburgh, to the far east, which is Philadelphia, and right in the center come down to Harrisburg, the capital, along that interstate highway system are all Democrats, and all the spaces in between are Republicans. Now, Virginia is equally divided in a way, in that Northern Virginia, which borders Washington, D.C. and Maryland, and is a very wealthy area, one of the wealthiest areas in the United States of America, is usually far more liberal and far more understanding, informed, educated, and wealthy than all the rest of Virginia, which I believe Annette is referring to, which is evangelical, uneducated, and very possessed of a type of backwoods anger that is derivative from the Andrew Jackson ideology. The only good Indian is a dead Indian. The only good slave is one picking cotton. Am I right or wrong, Annette?
I couldn't be more accurate on describing that.
All right. So following up on Kervin, and I think what Kervin was getting at here to a certain extent is, how do we change people in a state like, let's say, backwards Virginia? How do we change backwards Virginia to make it more like Northern Virginia, a more enlightened, understanding, liberal-minded people who love and value life instead of hating and taking life? How do you go about doing that?
It's hard. It's something I haven't seen happen yet, and I've been part of this movement for a while.
Here's the thing.
I've lived... Oh, pardon.
It's gone. Since 1977, The overwhelming majority of death row defendants have been executed for killing white victims, although African Americans make up about half of all homicide victims. The percentages, the statistics go as follows. The race of homicide victims in cases resulting in an execution since 1976. 6% of those executed for murder have murdered Hispanic. 15% of them have been African American. 2% have been other. But a massive, whopping 77% of the victims where someone has been sentenced to or executed, 77% have been white. And a report sponsored by the American Bar Association in 2007 concluded that 1/3 of African American death row inmates in Philadelphia would have received sentences of life imprisonment if they had not been African American. What is the percentage? What is the statistics of death row and executions in your state, Annette, in comparison to black and white inmates?
I don't have none of these statistics right in front of me, and I can't quote them right off.
Okay.
I have Kervin, I have a comment here from someone, and he wrote, I lived in Virginia most of my life, about 40 years, and while growing up and going to integrated schools, it is where I felt the most racist of racist. I see no change in that status at all. Some things never change. I no longer live in that state and will never go back there ever. It is the deep South, and there's no need to say any more. That's pretty sad.
That's very sad indeed. But here's the thing. You've got somebody like Annette Blankenship who is from that place, who obviously has a heart for injustice. So her heart's in the right place already. So the question that you are asking her, David, in particular, that I was also asking was, how do we change the hearts and minds of the people that are so filled with hate that they can't see beyond their own injustice in order to stand alongside others that have also had injustice meted out to them, so that they can stand together in unity to fight against the same injustice that they also passionately desire to see a change in. Now, this is where hatred becomes its most abhorrent, is where you will not see past your own prejudice to stand alongside another who is inflicted or affected by the same injustice as you are because of their race, color, or creed. Now, there lies an even bigger problem and a bigger issue that separates us and that divides us as a people trying to fight for the same objectives. But it's going to take somebody like Annette Blankenship and others like her who are fighting for those injustices to stand alongside others of different races and different cultures fighting for the same thing to show that change can take place. Would you not agree, Annette?
I agree 100% on that.
So where do you stand when you see Black Lives Matter being projected across your TV screens and newspapers in Virginia?
I support Black Lives Movement 110%, and that's with life speaking for itself.
You see, because
I just wish people would get involved, and that's going to take the president, that's going to take our state representative, that's going to take our candidates, speaking some positive to America instead of all this negative.
Absolutely, but in order to get to the positive, we're going to have to get past the negative. And the bottom line is we're not going to get past the negatives until they stop screaming out this red herring, all lives matter, and start realizing that if all lives did matter, then black lives would matter too.
Well, D.C., Washington, D.C., and my legislators in Virginia, they need to come out of denial, because we've got years of studies. We got years of legislation that's been floored or tabled. We got years of all kinds of things that our government can get into the solutions for, instead of keeping them hid behind closed doors and making us live in a Hitler state of mind or a communist state of mind, because that's not helping no one. We're using the school to prison pipeline. I was begging for help from my kids when they were teenagers. They're 25 and 30 now. And as long as you're the minority and you're begging for help, it is a long, hard road. And we need absolutely every walk of life and every position, every kind of person speaking up for criminal justice reform, speaking up against injustice, because it's went on too long. It's just entirely...
Annette, we live in a place called America. And this country is full of contradictions. And until we have an education system that educates people about simple things like logic, or simple things that 2 and 2 equal 4, they don't equal 7, or that Donald Trump is a fascist, he's not a messiah. He said that he alone can solve all the problems of America. Well, let me tell you, look at this. Why do women who are poor, with children, living on food stamps, making minimum wage at McDonald's, their children don't have health care, why are they voting Republican in Oklahoma and Kansas and Texas? Because they're full of contradictions. Why does a woman who may need an abortion because she has a child that's deformed or is going to be mentally ill so terribly, it's going to cost the government $5 million to keep it alive for 9 years, and then it's going to die? Why shouldn't she have abortion? Why? She votes for the Republican knowing she needs it. Why is it that Christians in Virginia and Texas and Alabama go to church every Wednesday night and every Sunday, and they go and pray and hallelujah, and they want to save you and baptize you and put you into a damn river with catfish and praise the Lord and Jesus, and the next day they put people to death knowing the person could be innocent? They don't let you have a DNA test because it might get him off. Not that it might prove him innocent, but it might get him off. Why is it in Texas, when you're put in the death row, they burn up all the evidence after 3 years? So there's no possibility of ever having a DNA test 15 or 20 years later. There may be tests on the verge of being discovered right now that would liberate people from the death row that we don't even know about. But they tear up the evidence. They destroy the evidence. They make it illegal for you to get the evidence. Why is it that we in America say we are a free society? We believe in democracy. We believe in the dignity of human life. Why do we say this and, on the other hand, give a prosecutor power of life and death over a human being? And they say, oh, well, it's a jury. Oh, there's a judge. No, there isn't. No, there isn't. We have that jury and that grand jury, and those judges do exactly what a prosecutor tells them to do, or they'll lose their election next time, or they'll be indicted by the prosecutor themselves. And we know it because look at Chris Christie. Chris Christie the other night at the Republican convention stood up there, lock her up, lock her up. He put Hillary Clinton on trial before the world television, without a defense attorney, without a judge, and without a jury, and those rabid masses of Republican unwashed swine upon whom this nation has thrown pearls will be consumed in sewers, convicted her, lock her up, and had they a rope in their hands, they would have dragged her down the street just like they did a man in Jasper, Texas, until his head fell off. That's what they would do. So we are a country full of contradictions. And until those contradictions are revealed in places like Virginia, where the church in rural Virginia, in evangelical Virginia, in backward Virginia has absolute control over the life and death of other human beings, there will be no change, and people will die at the hands of a state that does not even know how to spell the word justice. Now tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Our state's very contradicted. Very, very contradicted. And I mean, it's in black and white. It's in law. It's in law. You go to lawyers, you go to your legislators, you point out this codes of law to them, and then they don't abide by it. Our leaders, our representatives, our legislators need to quit contradicting America and step up to the plate and say some mistakes have been made. We need to fix this system because, like you said, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. Ain't nobody going to be able to do nothing about it because nobody wants to come to terms and agreement. Why do we go to church on Wednesdays and Sundays? To praise God, hallelujah. Then the other days of the week treat people like they're crap, or say guilty, 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 and write that person off before you even know anything about them. Why do we destroy evidence? These are people and families that's at stake right now, that's on death row, and it needs to be abolished. Why do we have mentally ill people locked up? Why do we have drug addicts locked up for nonviolent crimes in America and the Commonwealth of Virginia when we are spending $28,000 to $30,000 a year individually to keep these people locked up, when that could go into preventative measures to their case, to proving them innocent, to their alternative to incarceration? Because we got to learn how to forgive. America needs to heal because this has been decades of hard on crime that ain't helped no one, because now we have innocent people left and right, and we need to change that. All courtrooms are supposed to be to protect us, to protect the innocent. You're right, the prosecution runs that courtroom. That prosecution runs that judge. That prosecution runs that jury. It is time that let the evidence speak for itself. The code of law contradicts itself a million times. It's in black and white, and it's not helping no one. We are not representing what our forefathers stood for.
Here's a quick question for you, Annette. A couple of quick questions. Have you had any success in the 10 years that you've been campaigning as an activist for abolishing the death penalty? Do you work with lawyers, or are you working by yourself? And is your church involved, and are they behind you and what you do?
All right, I'm usually by myself. My kids used to do it with me, but they've grown up and moved away. I don't go to church on a regular basis, and the last church I was a member of is over 200 miles away. And like I said, I'm just a loner. I do this stuff. I volunteer. I have volunteered with Advocare Incorporated, but the man that founded that, he passed away. I have volunteered with Virginia Cure. I have volunteered with other organizations, but right now I'm just stuck in my home doing this, doing what I know how to do best, what I've done my entire life. Just tell people you can represent yourself, show people how to represent yourself. That's all I know how to do. I can give suggestions. I can tell people.
Annette, how did you get involved in this? I think if we could understand the key to your motivation, what spurs you spiritually and physically to fight for justice in this way, it might be a key to how we could get other people involved who are like you.
Don't be scared. The passion I have, or the spirituality, is from within. My spirituality.
I understand, but I'm asking.
But that's right. What provoked you? What prompted you to get involved in this particular line of activism?
Did you see something, hear something, feel something, know somebody? What caused you to be so aroused by it?
Well, it's the way I came up, and it's the lifestyle living here in Virginia. If you are the minority, you're supposed to shut up and nobody's supposed to listen to you. That's how people treat you. Or if you speak up like I do, you're crazy. But I personally have had my hands on, or I put this way, my life was completely taken away by a courtroom one time.
By what?
By a courtroom.
A courtroom?
A court. Yes. My whole life was practically taken. On one, my life was taken, but on the other hand, that gave me a freedom that I thought was a freedom 27 years ago. It's not a freedom. I was granted acquittal, And I would have rather done 80 years than been granted that acquittal to be tampered with to get convictions on people that was not guilty. And that's the bottom line.
Here's the thing. I'm just looking at another quote. It's a guy called John Connor, a 60-year-old man who has been on death row in Georgia for 34 years, was scheduled to be executed on the 14th of July, which is about a week and a half ago. He was represented at trial by an inexperienced attorney, and his jury heard nothing about his abusive childhood or his possible intellectual disability. Here's a couple of other points I want to bring across. In 2007, a study of death sentences in Connecticut conducted by Yale University School of Law revealed that African Americans defendants received the death penalty at 3 times the rate of white defendants in cases where the victims are white. And in addition, killers of white victims are treated more severely than people who kill minorities when it comes to deciding what charges to bring. One more statistic. In January 2003, study released by the University of Maryland concluded that race and geography are major factors in death penalty decisions. Specifically, prosecutors are more likely to seek a death sentence when the race of the victim is white and are less likely to seek a death sentence when the victim is African American. These are the type of statistics that we are hearing about, that we are reading, that we are being contacted about, that people are telling us about, that nothing is being done about. And I appreciate what's going out there in Virginia and your almost one-man standalone campaign. But surely in order to get change brought about, even in the environment where you live, you're going to need to be standing with more than just yourself. How do you plan to go about generating support and awareness in your vicinity to raise the number of voices that are calling out for the abolishment of the death penalty, even in Virginia?
Kervin, let me just jump in 1 second.
Go ahead.
And that, just 1 second. I want to say something about Connecticut, my state. 2 years ago, the legislature and governor in the state of Connecticut abolished the death penalty. And this year, the Supreme Court of the state of Connecticut, in which I live and proud of, ruled that all those people on death row cannot now be put to death, even though they were put on death row during the legal death penalty. So no one will be executed by the government in the state of Connecticut in the future.
Now that's a hallelujah. Now, I got family out there in Connecticut, in Hartford. That's where my mother's sister lives.
Oh, it's an hour away.
Yeah, so I'm pleased to hear that my cousins and my family members are not likely to be at the end of a rope by the end of the year. Not that they live a criminal life, far from it. But it's great news to hear that there are changes being made in states across the United States. But how do you plan to bring about change in Virginia, Annette, if you're still standing alone on this subject?
I am just basing it because I've lost everything I had. And I'm just basing it off the internet and how I've worked with people over the last decade off the internet. Using the best skills I've got available to get people involved, because people will stand up. If you show them a way and you be a light, it'll click, it'll come to them. But we need everybody standing up now. We don't got another day to wait. President Barack Obama said criminal justice reform, and our president said it. If our president said it, that means everybody in America, and that means the Commonwealth of Virginia included, needs to get on the ball with criminal justice reform, especially the death penalty. How can we keep on killing people if we got innocent people in prison? This backlog is backed up for decades. Where is this common sense in law? Of us will have to be threatened or have a threat hanging over our head that we might be wrongfully convicted and have to spend the rest of our life in prison for something we didn't do. That's not putting priorities in order if we're leaving people locked up in prison and on death row that didn't do the crime. How is that priority in our government? Government is not our government no more. They're bullying us. They're bullying all of us. And it's time. I would love to be a rally in my area. I would love to have more. I would love for people to start getting involved
But people are scared of the government, and the government needs to step up and say, we don't want you to be scared, because it does this. Because right now, people are running in fear. They're either reaching out to drugs, they're losing everything they have, barely holding on, or they're going to prison. We are seeing entirely too many people in prison. Their whole lives getting ruined because these courts want to tell us how to walk, tell us how to talk, tell us how to dress. No, quit wasting your time on control. Quit wasting your time on being tough on crime. We need to be smart on crime. It takes less money to educate people. It takes less money to speak up. It takes less money for us to start communicating with each other, because the money we are using in these high-profile trials could be going to helping communities, to helping individuals, and letting these innocent people out. We've got innocent people backed up from death row or life in prison or some ridiculous amount of time. Well, they didn't do the crime, but someone else did, but they're still sitting in prison. Where is our leader even making any sense? You said it's Farwell. It is Farwell country in one part, just how you described it. It is just like that here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I am totally scared to speak up to anyone in Virginia today. Because if I hadn't spoke up to anybody I've spoke up to, and nobody's standing beside me yet, and I'm almost 50 years old, I might as well finish, sign, seal, and deliver this one off myself. Because I am tired of seeing kids addicted to drugs. Then all of a sudden they get kicked out of school, and then all of a sudden they get a charge against them. Then they're indicted to circuit court, and then they're indicted. They get sentenced, and other charges crammed on them to make the public feel safe. Well, how can the public feel safe if our courtrooms ain't even?
Annette, let me go back to what you said earlier about Black Lives Matter. Obviously, people who wind up on death row have two things in common. Either a minority or very poor. Rich people do not wind up on death row. They wind up in mental institutions for a few years, and then they run off to Cuba or Paris or somewhere like that. We know that. That's justice in America, and anyone else would find that in the dictionary under the word injustice. But with Black Lives Matter, do you see them possibly having sufficient influence in a state like Virginia, joining up with other people who may be disadvantaged either by race or economic status, making a difference? Or do you see, if they do begin to gain some type of influence or power, that the white people of Virginia who fear the changing America, who possess weapons, who are full of hate and religious self-righteousness, do you see them leading to a situation where the laws would be made more strict and even more injustice might be done? Well, how do you see Black Lives Matter affecting the situation in Virginia?
I think Black Lives Matter helps us speak up easier, if that makes any sense, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I think when people see more people involved and connecting together, and when I think people see our leaders encouraging us to connect together and let's make America what it used to be. What I can't understand is, our legislators, our representatives, why is it that over the last 30 years, we have wrote law after law, we've stricken, we have amended, we have added. Why can we not simply go retroactive on everything? Because back in the day, people did get second chances. Back in the day, we didn't have 2.5 million people incarcerated. Back in the day, the mental hospitals was open. Back in the day, the mental hospitals and the mental health centers helped addicts. I understand it's more things out there for addicts today, but we need to start focusing on the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is, especially Commonwealth of Virginia, the way our prosecutors and the way our courtrooms bully people. They're scared to speak up. They're scared to challenge law, which is their constitutional right. Your constitutional rights, you're supposed to have a fair trial, to be innocent until proven guilty. Our whole system has been flipped inside out, and it's time to go back. You know, prisons for profit is good for no one. The CEOs don't even work out. We have people getting hurt in prisons, whether it's gang affiliated, you know, dirt that goes on in prisons. It's time our Lady Liberty stood for freedom. And right now, we are the number one country prison nation. All these other countries abolishing the death penalty, but is America? No. We got other places that going through case after case after case of wrongfully convicted, while other states, you know, what happened? Why did you pass these laws if you're not going to use them? Like with non-DNA. You know, why do you pass these laws for biological, non-biological DNA? Why do you pass these laws? You're going to be selective? And you're right. The minority is the one that loses out. Minority's family goes hungry trying to pay for those phone calls. The minority's family goes hungry trying to keep money in the canteen. And I couldn't even imagine being locked up for a crime I didn't commit. America needs to think about how many thousands of people are honestly locked up for a crime they did not commit. You know, this mentality in Virginia say, oh no, my law wouldn't do that to me. Or they're scared to speak up, but they still don't think the law would do that to them because they're too trusting. When our government, while we had our backs turned, our government started putting dollar signs on our forehead, and that needs to change. People should not be warehoused for kickbacks from canteen, kickbacks from the phone calls, kickbacks from the prison labor. This is too much of a prison nation, a police state nation. It needs to stop.
Does that answer your question, David?
I think so, but what I'm trying to get at is we have all these people locked up. Now, a lot of them in Virginia have been released. They did their time. They paid their price for their offense or alleged offense. And they're still branded with that F. They can't vote. They can't have a gun. In many cases, they can't even rent an apartment. They have to check a box that they're convicted felon. They can't get work. It seems like even if you don't get the death penalty, in a way, once you go to prison, the government, and in Virginia particularly, along with some other southern states, you're branded in such a way as once you're released, you can't work, you can't live, you can't vote, you can't influence the laws, you can't have a job, you can't even go to school in some places. How do we change it? How do we get the legislature to understand that there has to be a second chance? You know, in the old days, it was go west, young man. You messed up in New York or Philadelphia or Georgia. You moved to California or Oregon and you started over. But now you've got the internet. You've got the credit card reports. You've got credit agencies. You've got banks. You've got newspapers. You've got social media. You've got people following you. You're branded. You can never, ever, ever start a life again. So, how do we move beyond this?
So here's the thing, David. In your submission there, what I get is this: if you've made a mistake in your life, there's absolutely no reason why you should turn your life around and start doing good, because you'll never be allowed to. So everybody is encouraged to carry on leading a bad life once they've made that mistake, because there's no way out. So therefore, your criminals will remain criminals, and your criminal fraternity and environment will only increase in numbers as the days go by. So surely you're quite right there. And for me, the government has to be looking at a way of giving people an opportunity to change their lives, to turn their lives around, some sort of incentive that makes them want to stop being the way they were and start being part of the society and the environment and the community that is productive and proactive. And unless you start looking at ways of allowing ex-felons or ex-convicts from coming back into the community as normal citizens that have an opportunity to start rebuilding their lives again, you're never going to see that change, are you?
Let me say this. There are solutions to this. First of all, if the state wants to lock you up or execute you, the state should have to pay that expense. In other words, that community, that county or city or state that wants to put you in jail for 50 years for having some methamphetamine or having a gun when you're not supposed to have a gun or shooting somebody's dog when you weren't supposed to, then they should bear the full cost of that expense. And it should be a direct cost, just like our schools and our employees. In other words, you want to lock up 75 more people this year, you got to raise the taxes on the people. You can't borrow money to do that. Second, we know that the federal prison system has far fewer people for a far shorter time than the state system. Why is that? Simple. Because the state system is private. There are private jails all over America, private prisons all over America. Now, think of them as hotels. How does a hotel make money? Heads in beds. You got to put somebody in that room to make money. Now, these private prisons are being built all over America, and they have to make money for their stockholders. And Donald Trump is a big stockholder in prisons. Now, how do they make money? They put people in prison. So somebody who in the past might have got 2 years for a felony charge is now getting 10. And when you get out, God forbid, you've got two problems. One is the prosecutor has already told everyone in the community, and the newspapers carry the message for them like rabid dogs. They say, this is an animal. This is a person who's asocial. This is a sociopath, a psychopath. He's an animal, an animal, an animal, and he has to go to prison. So when he gets out of prison, what do you have? You have an animal. Well, we can't let animals work. We can't let animals live in our neighborhood. We can't let animals teach schools. We can't let animals vote. So they have to treat them like animals to ensure that they remain animals so that they will go back to the for-profit prison to make money for the stockholders who are bribing the politicians and the judges and the prosecutors who make it all happen. It's a very clear path to a society that is composed of evil.
But how do we go about changing the mindset of that society that sees imprisoning them, long-term imprisoning them, the death penalty and death row as the only alternative to a consequence?
The way you change that, and Annette, you can contribute if you like. In my view, with my vast experience in this area and study, there is only one method that will work, and that is all prosecutors will be appointed. No prosecutor can serve for more than 6 years in one district or one state. In other words, if you're a state prosecutor, you can be in this county, but then you got to move to a county 75 miles away or 150 miles away. You can never be in one district, or if you're a federal prosecutor, a state, for more than 6 years. And you cannot be elected. You will be appointed by the governor or a committee appointed by the governor of experts. That will take the re-election incentive out of the prosecutors. It will take the possibility of bribing them with campaign contributions out of the prosecutor's office. It will disincentivize prosecutors from telling juries, judges, newspapers, and the community who votes for them that a human being who made a mistake is unworthy of a life and is an animal. That is where you begin. And if you are unwilling to make that fundamental change, that is very simple. If we could term limit the President of the United States in 1948, we can term limit prosecutors. If you're not willing to do that, you're saying three things. We need prosecutors to keep blacks, Hispanics, and poor people down. We need prosecutors to ensure that our jails and for-profit prisons will always make money for the rich people. And we need prosecutors to ensure that judges look good and get reelected, that they have a path to the presidency and Senate and Congress and governorships and other higher offices. Because the most elected officials in high office in America have not only been lawyers, but specifically prosecutors. This Trey Gowdy, who had this fiasco of a circus against Mrs. Clinton about the emails, was our prosecutor from South Carolina, and South Carolina is only 1 degree different from Virginia in its low-class hate for blacks, poors, Hispanics, and those who are less privileged than those born to the royal Southern tradition of plantation owners and owners of human people, as though they are chattel instead of possessed of a soul from God Almighty.
Wow. You know what, David? I couldn't have put it better myself. Here's the thing, Annette. Are you still there, Annette?
Yes.
It almost sounds like
Yes.
an absolute battering of Virginia in particular and states just like it. But let me just say this. Up until 2005, I lived a very ungodly life. I lived a life that was very crooked, bad indeed. And in fact, I'd had, up until that moment in time, I had had over 30 years of convictions. And my first one being attempted murder. Even at the early age of 14. In 2005, I was actually looking at a 14-year prison sentence when I got a wake-up call and pleaded for a second chance, a chance to live my life all over again and try and do it differently. Now, I don't know why the judge decided to listen or pay attention to my plea, but I could only pray that God was in my corner and believe that God was in my corner at that moment in time. And I was given another opportunity to change my life in 2005. And I stand, walk before you today because of the grace that was shown to me in 2005 and an opportunity to turn my life around that allowed me to meet the woman that I've now been married to for 10 years and get my children back into my lives again, be a working, positive, productive member of my community and be doing things like what I'm doing right here. In fact, I was also celebrated as the Pride of Coventry, the local hero and a Lifetime Achievement Award winner some 6 years ago. No, not even as far as that. 2009, round about there. And now 2010, yeah, about 6 years ago. And featured on many documentaries and TV programs for positive and constructive things that I've done in a community since I turned my life around. Here's the thing. If I had lived in the United States of America and in Virginia in particular, I wouldn't even be alive. I'd be dead. I'd have been given a life sentence a long time ago. I'd have never had an opportunity, A, to turn my life around, B, to give my children a pride in their father, and C, to be able to be a positive, productive, contributive member of my community. And be able to lead the way, be a light, a shining example and a light, a beacon to others that their lives can change too. Change has to start somewhere and it's got to start from within. And the bottom line is, David is right. There are instrumental changes that need to be made in the prosecutorial system, in the judicial system. There has to be reform. And they have to be stripped of the power that they have to play to the audiences of those that are electing them based on whatever is a common current agenda and electing, voting, procedural issue of the moment. Whatever seems to be hot on the plate right now, that needs to be removed as a reason for why they prosecute and why they sentence people to death. When these things are removed as a playmaker in those areas, you may well be able to look at justice being seen to be done in a more sensitive and compassionate manner than what you're seeing it being done. But it won't happen unless you start infiltrating the very infrastructure of your community and stop worrying about being victimized or persecuted because of your beliefs or your views. You've got to be prepared to die for them, because there are innocent people dying in prison. And if we can't stand, I would rather stand with somebody who stands for what they believe in than to stand with somebody who believes in nothing at all. And sometimes we've got to wear our hearts on our sleeves so that other people know we mean what we say. The question has to be is, how far are we prepared to go in order to achieve our objectives? Are we armchair viewers? Are we armchair supporters? Do we watch from the comforts of our own homes? Or are we prepared to go out there into the streets, roll our sleeves up and get our hands dirty? That has to be the question we ask each and every one of ourselves before we enter into this affray of this particular arena, because these lives are being lost continually. And people like me would have never been given an opportunity of a second chance had we been subjected to the kind of law and justice that you guys are dishing out there in places like Virginia.
Annette, do you think there's any possibility to have prosecutorial reform in Virginia? Is there anyone doing this?
I haven't never seen it, but that don't mean it ain't happening. I don't know. But to me, no. I feel like we should, I agree with you on the prosecution, that process. But we need to look at the sentencing guidelines too, because not everybody's the same.
Absolutely not.
In the sentencing guidelines,
Absolutely not, and that's the whole point. The judicial system has just got this little sort of like league table that it decides, well, for that one you just go to death row, for this one you just get life, for this one you get executed immediately. And the bottom line is there are not enough circumstances being taken into consideration on this prosecutorial issue, and there has to be reform before there's change.
Not only that, but let me say this, and this is really important to me. And Annette, if you'd like to comment, or Kervin, you may as well. I think that no matter what a person does, he's still a human being. He's still someone made in God's image. That is something no one can take away from me ever, no matter what. You can torture a person, and that person will never be the same again, but he still has a soul, and that soul is known to God. I believe that. Now, when a prosecutor has so much power, he can twist and turn your soul and make you do things you would never do. For example, prosecutors in South Dakota pick up a 17 or 18-year-old boy or girl at a high school. They've got a marijuana with them or some kind of a drug. They then tell that child, you've got to become a narc. You've got to squeal on other people. But not only do you have to squeal, we want you to set other people up. We want you to call your friends and offer them drugs. And we want you to tape record it. You are turning this person into a honey trap, or what the CIA used to call a little bird. The Russians would send someone's typing. The Russians would send a little bird to ensnare an army general and turn him into a spy, or a diplomat and turn him into a spy. Our prosecutors are taking perfectly normal and good young people and other people and turning them into criminals under threat of prosecution and loss of freedom. Our police are authorized to lie to people. Our prosecutors and their investigators are authorized to lie to people. They lie. But if you lie to them, you are obstructing justice and you will go to prison. You can lie all day long if you're a policeman. You can testify in court that you lied, and it makes no difference. until we have prosecutors and a justice system where all lies are punished, where all crimes are punished, where all murders are punished, and where all people are subject to an equitable legal system, there will be no respect for law. There will be continued fragmentation, and there will be, and this is the worst of all, a lack of trust in the very government we depend upon to protect and defend our lives, as every president, every elected official, and every prosecutor swears to do. You cannot lie to people and then not lie on behalf of yourself. You cannot tell a policeman, you can go lie to that guy. You can lie to that guy. You can lie here to get a conviction. You can lie here to put him in prison. And then when that policeman commits a crime and shoots somebody through a window who's totally innocent, what is that policeman going to do? Tell the truth? Hell no. He's been taught to lie, trained to lie, encouraged to lie, and most terrible of all, rewarded to lie. So
Absolutely.
If we want to get down to the basic facts of justice in America, we must begin with demanding a fundamental bar for integrity, honesty, truth, and a belief in a higher moral code than one that will put a person in prison to glorify a prosecutor for higher office and reward a policeman by making him a captain one day.
Listen, here's the thing. I don't think anybody here is trying to say...
Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, David. It makes absolutely sense. But let me just clarify something. I don't think there's anybody here on this show, in fact on this planet, that believes that there shouldn't be consequences for bad action. No one is saying that if people do wrong that there shouldn't be a penalty and there shouldn't be a price to pay. Nobody says that if somebody goes out and just goes and kills an innocent woman and an innocent child, that they shouldn't actually have to face justice for that event. But here's the thing. Justice seems to be, real justice seems only to be for the few and privileged, and most of the people who are poor and who are not unable to get good representation are left swimming in a very deep sea without a canoe and a paddle. Now that's the real issue that we face. A majority of the people that you see on death row are the people that have not been able to afford themselves a good attorney, or neither have been able to have a good attorney appointed to them. And yet there are people who have far more. I mean, let's just take... I just want to go to Oscar Pistorius for a minute, right? Oscar Pistorius is that Australian... South African athlete who killed his wife. And when you see the kind of arena that he was given, the defense that he was given, the support that he was given, and for a moment he was, even the first presiding judge was very lenient, even while we were sitting out there screaming at our TVs. You know, we can see how could you go up to this small room and fire shots the way that you fired them and say that you wouldn't have known that the person in there wouldn't have been hurt, injured, or even killed at the height and the trajectory of your aim. And for me, because he was a celebrity, because he was well known, and because the judge was almost intimidated by the outcome of what that might do, he had a very lenient sentence initially. And even the sentence that he's going to get now, because he is getting a heavier sentence, will still not compare to the type of sentence had that been someone like me, standing before a jury, faced with a crime as horrific as the one that he was facing, the murder of his wife, and a conjuring up of a false defense, claiming that he thought that he was being robbed or the house was being broken into and it was an intruder in the house. If that was me faced with the same scenario, and if that was a member of a community in say somewhere like Virginia, that would have been the death penalty immediately, without any further subsequent help or support. But this was a celebrity, a well-known celebrity, someone who'd brought gold medal and honor and pride to a country, and they were trying to protect him. And isn't that the same that can be said for some of these rich conglomerates who commit crimes far worse than the crimes that are committed by some of those that are sitting on death row as we speak? And the bottom line is, until justice becomes justice for all, until it's equal and its equality is subjected to all, then there is no justice in the justice system that we're talking about in the United States of America, because there are people who can afford attorneys that can get them out of a charge, let alone get them out of a death penalty. Is that not correct, Annette?
That's most certainly correct.
And so, go on, go ahead.
Oh, I said you couldn't be more accurate on that.
So how does the campaign for those that are getting away with their crimes stand against those campaigns that are fighting for those that are facing injustice?
I think right now it's just very unfair because, speaking of Virginia, I mean, you got cases here in Virginia that should have been overturned a long time ago. But then you got the blue-collar workers, then you got the white-collar workers. And you know, the white-collar workers keep on taking the headlines and covering up the real issues. I mean, our leaders, Bob McDonnell, Governor McAuliffe, Barack Obama, our senators, our legislators, they need to represent us. That's it. They need to represent us. You're not representing us no more. You're letting us walk into a courtroom and hanging us out to dry before we even walk in there. It is time that changed, because people do deserve second chances. And some people, it does take 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 chances, because everybody's got a different walk of life. Everybody's life is different. But as far as, you know, your story goes, redemption is the key. Redemption and forgiveness, because we go to church on Sunday mornings, we learn forgiveness and we learn redemption to apply to the rest of our lives. We are not supposed, our leaders should not be manipulating us in a courtroom where they act like they're doing us a favor, when after we walk out that courtroom, we'll live with this. Communities, families, individuals have to live with what happened in that courtroom. And the courtroom today seems to be the most dishonest place for anybody to be.
Here's the thing.
And that's just how.
Here's the thing.
I agree.
I don't always agree with David's rantings against Christianity as a whole, because I'm a Christian myself. But I have to ask this question, and I have to agree with him to a certain point. Where is the Christianity in these states that are killing, executing, putting people on death row? Where is the compassion? Where is the Jesus in them when these people are being put up in unfair judicial systems? Where is the church standing in all of this? And what is the church in those states doing to abolish the death penalty? What is the church and the Christians of those states doing to stand alongside organizations? It's great standing up there saying Black Lives Matter are all about hate and Black Lives Matter are all about terrorism. But where are the Christians and the church movements when it comes to defending and standing alongside innocent individuals, people that are persecuted? Because for me, that's what I'm yet to see. You know, I've seen pastors, black pastors, go and stand alongside Donald Trump. I want to see black pastors go and stand alongside Black Lives Matter. I've seen black pastors stand up alongside those people with money. I want to see black pastors go and stand alongside the poor, those that have been subjected to the death penalty, those that are on death row. That's what I want to see. So where is the church and Christianity in the middle of the injustice of its people? And what is the church doing to support the injustice of its own community?
Could I jump in, since you mentioned me, and then Annette, you jump in? It's not that I rant against Christians. It's just that I ask those who claim to be Christian to meet a basic standard, which is in compliance with the founder, who was a Jewish rabbi named Jesus. That's all I'm asking them to do. Now, and their Savior, so the Messiah. So let me say that. Now, as far as where is it in the South, Kervin, in my opinion, and Annette, please correct me, they have a great deal of Christianity, compassion, love, and forgiveness, provided, of course, those who are asking for it and need it happen to be white, Southern, middle class, or rich, and one of the members of their club, and certainly not sympathetic to blacks, Hispanics, or the poor.
Spot on there, David. I couldn't have put it better myself. Annette, do you want to respond to that?
That's it. Oh, I agree with it. Where are these people? You know, I don't know if it was Jesse Jackson or Reverend Sharpton, but what I said 2 years ago, whenever Black Lives Movement started, right after and repeat expected different results. Well, you know, now these courtrooms are starting to hit that middle class family. And it's, it's starting to pay them. And yes, it is white privilege. You know, I'm of the. I know
you are breaking up, Annette. So you need to try and move and get a better signal.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can hear you a bit better.
Sounds like a commercial. Can you hear me now?
Guys, are you there, Annette?
It's always, huh?
Yep. Okay, go ahead now.
It's conditions. It's conditions. It's conditional. These are conditional Christians. It only affects them if it affects somebody else, or affects the community, or if it affects somebody outside that school, then nobody gets help. When in fact, many more of the minority that is scared up. It's many more of the minority that listen, this ain't right. It's the minority needs to be educate your own selves on the law. Ask, do not never go in for an interview with a police officer. Make sure that is recorded, or make sure you got a lawyer present, because we need to start getting back on the ball to the right ways to handle, the courtrooms. So many people are bullied, scared that they automatically start talking when they're first arrested, or they just don't do when they're first arrested. And, I consider our courtrooms, the prosecutors, the police officers, you are preying on the minority now. You are preying on the minority. That needs to stop, because it's nothing godly at all about, from the police departments to the courtrooms to the Capitol Hills. It's nothing godly going on, because, you'd have some manners. You would have compassion for others. Instead of, here, you're going to take this, whether it's a death sentence, whether it's 80 years, 40 years, 25 years, you're going to take this. That's just, there ain't nothing nobody can do about that. Okay, this is the damage our courtrooms have done decade after decade. So now we got a society living in fear because of our leaders. Our leaders have to step up and give the cue that it is not okay for people to bully one another. It's such a thing as commerce. It's such a thing as, criminal restoration. We need to start looking at these things. Been in years of studies. We need to start listening to people. People need to speak up. People need to get involved. People need to educate their families, educate their communities, start having rallies, contact your legislators, your state reps, contact them. What are you doing for criminal justice reform? Share your stories of this injustice. Justice is happening. It's nothing nobody can change about that. It's happening in every community across America. Right now, we are looking pretty pathetic to the rest of the world if we're the number one capital in the world of locking up people. We want to think those people in other countries that are going hungry, we're seasoned sorry for them, when we, America, need to feel sorry for America for locking, allowing us to be locked up, allowing us to be treated like cattle, allowing us to be warehoused for a kickback for the 1%
a kickback for a seat in office, or a guaranteed position, in your community. Yeah, you be smart on crime. Tough on crime. You hurry up and lock up that person. And you hurry up and charge that person, lock them up to make the public safe. But is really the public safe if you're having to use tactics in a courtroom that's not protecting the innocent? Is that safe? Is it safe in the courtroom if a courtroom don't protect the innocent? It's no safer in the courtroom than it is out on the streets. As a matter of fact, I speak from my own life, and I find it safer living in the streets than I do in a courtroom.
That's absolutely spot on there. Once again, as we head towards the close of the show, we're about 10 minutes away from the end. An interesting thing is, Dr. David, next week we have a very interesting show. It's I've got two people coming on who are not activists, who are not involved in any organizations. These are two people who are going to give us a people's view of how they see current issues in America, including Black Lives Matter, these unlawful killings, the very stuff that we've been talking about on this show for over a year or so. But these are people that have listened to our show, have followed the work that we do, and we're going to get a people's view, which is going to be very interesting indeed. But in the meantime, just before we close, bearing in mind yet again my earlier statement that from as far as beginning of January 2016, there were 2,943 people, death row inmates in the United States of America. People that are facing death, execution, extermination, elimination from this planet because a certain group of elite and privileged individuals have decided that that's where they should be. I find that a travesty and a tragedy in today's society, where we're talking about God's kingdom, and this is God's universe, and I see no humanity in that and in those decisions whatsoever. For me, it's not just about the fact that there are 2,943 people on death row. It's how many of them are possibly potentially innocent, and how many of them, especially when you hear about some of the statistics and facts that Dr. David brought forward earlier on, like in Texas about the how long it takes before they burn up and dispose of the information and evidence, how many of them will never get an opportunity to prove that they were innocent, and sorry isn't going to quite cut it. If in 20 years after somebody has been executed and killed, that you find out that they were innocent, sorry just doesn't quite cut it to the generation of people that they've actually left behind. We're living in a state where we can't even get Obama to say sorry. We can't even get certain nations to say that they were sorry for some of the things that they've subjected other races and peoples to. We can't get them to say sorry for Hiroshima. We can't get them. There's so many wrongs that need to be righted. Yet, for me, when you've taken the life of an individual who's been on death row for 20 years and not given an opportunity to prove his innocence, and then you execute him, to find out that he was innocent 5 years later after his death, and to say sorry, just doesn't quite cut it with me. We need to find a way to abolish the death penalty worldwide, not just state by state, worldwide. But it is going to have to start state by state, and it will have to start in states like Virginia. Annette, we stand with you, we support you, we salute you for the stand that you make. But to be quite honest,
Thank you.
standing alone, you really need to find a way to get into your community. You need to find a way to get into your churches. You need to find a way to align yourself with organizations that are sympathetic to your cause and get them to come and stand with you. Because until you've got more than one person standing at the barrier, you're not going to be attracting enough attention to make a change where you are. But it does start with us. It does start with an individual who's prepared to stand for what they believe. And, you got people like me and Dr. David who put ourselves on the line line each and every week, right here on Issues Today on World Jam Global Radio, and we put our hearts on the sleeve. We roll up our sleeves and we get our hands dirty. We get tucked into the issues that most people are afraid to talk about, because we believe in justice. We believe in fairness. We believe in equality. And we believe in the humanity of the kingdom that God has created on this planet. So, we salute you, we support you, we encourage you. Dr. David, I don't know what you want to add to that. We're coming towards the end of the show.
I think that I wish Annette the very best. Don't be downhearted about anything. I can't emphasize enough that what Kervin said, you need to align yourself with others who share your views and your vision. You need to work with them. You need to learn from them. You need to teach them, and you need to create a movement that can have a real influence and success on others. Don't be alienated. God put us on earth as one. And when Adam complained about it, he said, sorry, I made a mistake. And he made Eve, and then it became all of us. So follow the advice of the Almighty, work with others, love others, and keep working for a mission that is very valuable, because if you can save one person, then you have saved the entire world.
And that's absolutely true. For me, Annette, before, I'm going to give you a closing word here in a minute, but I would start taking stories and cases of individuals into the churches. I'll be asking pastors, priests and vicars, whatever, to give me an opportunity to share a testimony or a story of somebody who wants to change their life but are not being given the chance to change their life. And then expose them if they don't let you. Call them out if they won't give you a chance to speak. Because if they're not there to represent their community, then I haven't got a clue what they're doing, handing out their offering plates and taking the money. So start where it's supposed to be, in those that are supposed to care, because there are communities, there are environments, and there are organizations that set themselves up for that purpose indeed. And you'd be doing those people that you're trying to represent a disservice if you didn't go into those areas and start drumming up the support there for us. But let me just say this. Here's an opportunity for you to make a closing statement, a closing argument on behalf of the Abolish the Death Penalty program. Go ahead. The platform's yours. 2 to 3 minutes. There you go.
Are you speaking to me?
Absolutely, Annette.
I just find it very important. I'm almost 50, and I know that I have went through churches, I've went through communities, I've went through groups of organizations. And when you're laying out a path or you have a goal, stick with it. Don't even let your government knock you off your path or your goal, because if God has you for a calling, God is going to give you what you need to use that calling to your fullest advantage. It might take a day, it might take a year, it might take 2 or 3 decades, but you never, ever give up on your community or your families the way the government has gave up on us. You stand in what you believe in. Your word is most certainly your bond. Now, that has been around for decades. Your word is your bond.
Absolutely.
And our leaders need to realize their word is their bond. And as long as they're hating on each other, America's going to hate on each other. And we have children paying the price for it, getting incarcerated now. We have innocent people getting incarcerated. We have families that's moved in on top of each other 3 or 4-fold across this nation because our leaders want to take everything away from us and then kill. An eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind in anything.
Absolutely. Listen, I want to thank both of you for being on the show again. Dr. David, I look forward to being with you again next week when we have a people's view on the current affairs that are taking place in America. Annette, thank you so much for being with us. I'll be back tomorrow morning with my gospel show, 8 o'clock GMT time. And as for that, that's about it. That's the way it is on Issues Today, World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin Julien, and this has been The Death Penalty. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. We're out of here. Right, I think I've lost my volume. Have I got it back? Yeah, I got it back. There we go.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity. This is clarity. Clarity.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Back in the day, I didn't really care about the system. It was all about survival.